Hello, friends. This is episode 204 of Stand, Speak, Shine. I'm Cherie Burton. This is a podcast for those who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. Now, I had to get brave to share this episode. This is an interview that Lisa Maria did for me last year. And she's the author of Magdalene Origins. She's an amazing mystical teacher and just a very grounded, beautiful, divine feminine way shower. She asked me to come on and share my story, specifically as it relates to organized religion and my religion of origin being the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly called Mormons. She actually had a keen interest in knowing about my story and what precipitated my exit from orthodoxy. Now, in saying this, I have not quote unquote left the church. Now, I know that's not going to make me a lot of fans in the ex-Mormon crowd or in the middle Mormon crowd or even in the staunch active crowd, but I am at where I am at. My heritage, being a seventh generation Latter-day Saint, and my autonomy or sovereignty does not rise and fall on outer structures, meaning that I don't prescribe to the path that everyone else is doing. I really never have. As I look back on my life, I was always kind of doing my own thing, even in that structured container of what could be considered a very high demand religion. I just want to give that perspective because as you'll listen, I have a great deal of respect for people who are still involved and are finding great value and beauty from that structure, as I did for many years. But you'll also hear how my journey, being very private, my personal awakening path as very tender and very sacred, it's kept me from really drawing strong lines in exactly where I'm at. Because I'm on the path of evolution, as we all are, and it keeps me open to what's next. That said, I don't see myself being able to come back into any kind of structured patriarchal hierarchy in the way that it exists now, if that makes sense, just because of where I've ventured and the sacred pilgrimages I've taken and the things that I've learned. I hope that you'll see that I've had a very thoughtful deconstruction. It's not something that I happened upon in an instant. It was a process. And we're all on our own paths. There is no one size fits all, even if everyone is in the same belief structure. There cannot be a one size fits all because we all have a very different set of past experiences, of genetic encoding, if you will, of family dynamics, cultural dynamics, and, our ethnicities. There's just so much complexity to who we are that it's really difficult to make a one size fits all. And that is actually what had me really diving into my own truth and finding and excavating what is true for me. So wherever you're at with religion or not, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to share this with you, especially for those of you who send me text messages of like, where are you at with the church, and how are you making it work or not making it work, or where are you at? Have you left? Are you in? Are you out? And I'm like, why do we have to choose a camp? And that's sort of where I orient from now. I'm in a middle path. And I've given a lot of thoughtful and careful deconstruction and reconstruction to having my own direct experience and connection to my creator and to all that is. And so I wanted to share this, especially as it relates to the path of the Magdalene and what that's meant for me and how that was a pivotal piece, especially while it was in France in 2018, a pivotal juncture in my journey and story as almost like a line in the sand for me in my own process of going down the rabbit hole and being held and sustained by Mother, what I perceive to be as Mother, the Great Mother. You could even say the Dark Mother because there was a lot of shadow work in being held in that fertile soil and that womb, that cosmic womb, while I started to unravel and started to question and honor my questions and honor my shadows. So anyway, thank you to all of you who listen. My numbers continue to grow. I treat that also as a very beautiful and sacred piece to my work is who comes into this space. So if it serves you, please leave a review on iTunes so that more people can access my offerings and also glean from the myriad of interviews, over 200 at this point, that I've done on this podcast.
So delighted to have with us today a guest I tremendously admire. I've learned so much from her wisdom, and she's also a podcaster. I'm sure she will tell us about that as well as many other amazing things. Cherie Burton, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
Now, you wear many hats, many sacred hats, that is, and you play many beautiful roles. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your calling and what it is that you are embodying currently in the world?
Yeah. Wow. Well, women are typically multitaskers, and I've heard it said that there's no way to be in balance. And so, trying to harmonize and wear all the hats, as you say, is a challenge. But I think the things I'm most passionate about are my role as a mom of 6, 3 boys, 3 girls, 4 of which are in their 20s and 2 are in elementary school.
Wow.
So that's fun. And I love business. I love the idea of a woman creating wealth. And I've had to bust through a lot of, poverty consciousness and all of that. My goal in business is to use it as kind of a ministry, and not in a religious sense necessarily, but just being able to be a servant leader. That really speaks to me. So I have an international wellness business. I travel, and I am really alive in that. And I've had to balance that tension between being a mom and having a business. That's a whole other discussion. My fast, besides talking, like on my podcast, I'm like a talker and a speaker, and I love to talk. I really love this beautiful concept of giving women permission to shine. So I have a Stand, Speak, Shine whole branding and retreats and programs and courses that really give women, especially women, and the feminine in men, which I'm coming more into a path with that, having young adult sons and a husband and 3 brothers and all that. But I just love this idea of letting your authenticity come to the surface and to guide people in becoming the truest expression of themselves. So those are my main quote unquote hats. And I love it. I love everything about opening the conversation to be real.
And you've had a lot of experience with that yourself. As I understand it from your story, I know that you have a background in what many of my listeners would recognize as orthodoxy, although perhaps a different type of it than many grew up in. You have sort of a unique journey. How does your unique background and path with faith and where you are now in your spiritual journey, how does that play into your story and your work?
Yeah. That's a really loaded and beautiful and paradoxical question.
I know, right? Let's get it kicked off with a big one.
I have always loved Christianity. I've always loved the concept of Jesus, the historical figure of Jesus, and everything goes along with the way and love. But I was raised in a very orthodox, high demand religion, Mormonism. And, 7 generations back. So on my mother's side, my father is actually a convert to Mormonism when he met my mother, but the second of 7 children. There's lots of 2s and 7s in my life. It's a whole pattern, but that's another discussion. But, 7 generation Mormon, and I live here in Utah, and my ancestors crossed the plains and risked life and limb and buried their babies just to get here to establish their Zion. And there's so much about this tradition and culture that I cherish and love, and it served me well at many junctures of my life. And I also see how it's caused some harm, which I never would have recognized had I not been in the space of working with women. Yeah, probably the biggest, and we can talk about Mary Magdalene because she was the catalyst that sort of I guess, woke me up or guided me. I mean, it's an inexplicable phenomenon and mystery that very mystical experience. But I lost a sister to suicide who's 2 years younger than me in 2005. And she had 5 children. At the time, I had 3. At the time of her death, her children ranged in age from 2 to 12. So this was very earth-shattering for our family.
Wow.
I actually lost an aunt to suicide as well. My dad's sister, she left a suicide note and asked my parents to raise her 3-year-old son. So my cousin was raised as my youngest brother. But we don't know how many generations back these mothers in deep suicidal depression, but my guess is many generations. But when it hit that close to home, when my sister took her life, as I said, we were close in age. We lived in the same town. She was very active in the LDS church. Her husband actually worked for the church, and it was very much her life. Mm-hmm. We read through her journals after her passing. I mean, this is a woman who was like a brilliant musician and very active in the faith, a very good mom. She did have a mental illness. She was bipolar. Of course, that complicated things in terms of like a painkiller addiction that she was trying to self-medicate. So she developed a painkiller addiction, but she'd been through a 90-day treatment center, and her actual way that she chose to exit this planet was through taking a 90-day, her insurance company sent her a 90-day supply of a drug that was used to manage her bipolar. And that's what she OD'd on, but it was not a relapse of her addiction. But in her suicide letter, she basically told her husband and the family that she would be a better guardian angel than she would be a mother. And she just couldn't do it anymore. She's always been a woman of faith. She's always, as all of my family, I mean, we were really and have been really steeped in this heritage of faith in God. And so when we got to her journals after she died, we found out she had stopped praying for 2 years. And that's like a big cataclysmic, like, what? You're not praying? Because prayer just is, I've lived most of my life as a prayer as I look back, just talking to God in my mind all the time. But she had ceased to do that because of feelings of unworthiness, deep feelings of unworthiness. So that experience was kind of the first inkling when I asked, when I stood over her grave and asked to be her voice and felt her presence affirming, yes. It was like, tell the truth, tell why, let's go. So I've been sort of deconstructing and unraveling all the shadow aspects of what may have created that dynamic with her. Yeah. And I'm seeing it now, like you can't unsee it after you see it and you recognize there are some really, really damaging aspects to this concept of giving over your authority, of feeling unworthy. It's an endless rabbit hole to go down once you see it, and you're not too popular when you start to ask questions and you start to dig a little deeper. So that's been hard. That's been really, really hard. It's been hard to love something so much and also have to identify the shadow aspects of it, because you just want it to heal. You want it to heal with your family, and you want it to heal culturally because these are your people and you love them.
Yes. And, something that I've observed and heard a lot in stories like this and in my own journey, just that it, as you said, it's layer by layer by layer. The more you see it, the deeper it goes, and it gets can get very messy very quickly, because this is not just, it's not just about religion or belief or spirituality. It's family, as you said, it's generations, it's tradition, it's culture. So how have we'll get to Mary Magdalene in a moment, because I definitely want to talk about her, but how, I guess, what has your process been like since that time? You have been sorting through these things. I know you've been doing a lot of courageous work. And for someone out there who maybe is just starting to see these things or feeling overwhelmed, might be useful to hear. How have you approached this process of reclaiming that sovereignty and releasing these things?
Well, Lisa, it's been so messy. I would like to say it was just like this whole beautiful sanctification process, and it's a deep unraveling and a lot of deep existential. I believe I really got to the blackest, darkest. Okay, it doesn't get any worse than this.
Yeah.
I surrender, because I wanted to feel these patterns. And I mean from, I don't know how many generations back. I'll just give you one example. So in Mormonism, part of our foundation was polygamy, the practice of polygamy, of men taking several wives. And that's always bothered me since I was a little girl. And I couldn't believe we weren't talking about it. And I didn't know why everyone else wasn't so bothered by it. And I was just kind of placated and moved along. And I finally reached a breaking point with it where I could not continue to put it on a shelf. I could not conceive of a creator who would have multiple, and I mean multiple, sister, wife, heavenly mothers. That's the theology. That's the subtly reinforced doctrine that does affect your psyche as a female. Not only do you not have priesthood authority, but you could be one of a collection of wives. And I know that sounds really like demeaning and disrespectful, but that's how it lands in you. That's the feeling. So when I finally, at age, I think I was I'm 53 now, but when I was like 48, I'm like, I felt like I don't have to accept this. And that was so liberating. And then I started really to study it. And for me, you asked about my process. My process is to research, to use my brain, not just trust and obey. Because that's what I was told. Like, if you really want to be righteous and spiritual, you just need to trust that God will work it all out in the end. Just have faith. Don't question, don't doubt. And that became so stifling and so painful to me. I thought I was going to go insane. I'm like, I can't. Like, if I need to preserve my mental and emotional health, I need to ask these questions. And I felt really liberated. And I also felt a lot of pain because I felt ostracized in my community. First, I wrote an essay called Sacred Rage about the practice of polygamy that was on another podcast called Breaking Down Patriarchy by another Mormon woman there's so many Mormon women who are like looking at this now and questioning it and writing about it, but it's still taboo. So I think, to answer your question, the biggest thing for me was I have to value my soul voice enough to go into these shadows, that just to put on a happy face and smile and everything's going to be okay and just obey is not working for us anymore. It's not working for us planetary wide. It's not just in religion that this is happening, but we've had this division where women are just kind of the silent observers of the men doing the real work. And that includes the research. And I know there's many amazing female scholars, writers who've been talking about this for a long time. And I happened on the scene, but I finally gave myself permission to go deep and go under the surface and lift the lid. And it took a lot of courage. So I got mentors, I got help, I got midwives, if you will, many of them. And my podcast has been extremely therapeutic because I talk to people like you're going to be on my podcast, and people that are firm, doesn't matter what their background is. There's been a lot of religious wounding and trauma and intergenerational trauma around these issues that I think now is becoming more transparent and people getting more vulnerable, but it takes courage, and it takes people saying, this pattern has to stop. This pattern will stop with me. And we need fortification with that. We need to find our tribes. I love your messaging about healing the relationship with the father wound. That came, that's come now. I healed this feminine wound of where's the absent mother and what has the patriarchy done and that kind of thing. But the divine masculine and my connection to a non-punitive God, Father, I didn't realize how deep, and I'm talking preschool age, that I decided I wasn't worthy, that I decided I had to be perfect, that where was God? He was abandoning me, all these things, right? And you've been part of the catalyst for that too. I told you I had a big trauma release with that very recently, and I didn't realize the word Heavenly Father, which is sort of Mormon vernacular for God in our culture and religion, was so charged and laced with fear, dominion. Yes, it's like benevolent patriarchy. It's like benevolent sexism, where it's just this nice, sweet way of saying God isn't happy with you right now. And I'm sorry to say, I sort of passed that on to my older kids. My younger kids, not so much. My older kids are unpacking that too. And you think you're doing right by doing that, just like my parents thought they were doing right, and my teachers at church. So giving myself that permission to ask, to probe, to fill journals, to find out of the box mentors. I mean, I'm talking, I've been all over the world on sacred pilgrimages, and I gave myself that permission because I had to do it. I had to do it to preserve my livelihood, to just feel okay inside of my skin. And
wow. Well, I have so much respect for your willingness to even reapproach the idea of the eternal masculine, because that takes so much courage. I mean, no matter how long you've been on a feminine healing journey, when it comes time, when that call comes to begin to do that work, it can be so easy to resist and run, just because it's so like that wounding is so deep, as you said, for almost every woman, almost all of us. It goes back to childhood, babyhood. I mean, it's so incredibly deep. And just having a privilege to be just a tiny part of that journey has been amazing. And you inspire me so much with your willingness to show up for that and for him, and to really explore what that looks like. And on that note, speaking of eternal masculine, eternal feminine, we have Mary Magdalene. We mentioned her earlier. Tell us how the call of the Magdalene showed up in your life. How has she been part of this journey for you?
Yeah, well, as I look back and follow like the divine breadcrumbs, I remember hearing about her in Sunday school, especially like on Easter, but it's just like a total like secondary mention, like a brief mention. And as I got older, I was like, I wonder like why he came to her first and why we don't talk about that. And it just kind of bothered me, but I just kind of let it. I thought she was the most enigmatic. I thought she was like a sinner. I thought she was, as we are led to believe, the seven devils came out of her, as it says in the New Testament, which means she must have been really bad. Jesus was a project for Jesus. And so I just sort of, again, just kind of shelved it. And when I went through what I can only term as my feminist awakening, and I mean that in the most sacred sense possible, it was like a sacred feminine awakening. Yeah, I can see how books were showing up about her. People would say her name and I would feel this divine spark charge. Yeah. And then I just started reading about her. And then I found the Gnostic Gospels. And then I started looking at goddess history, as you talk about in your book. I love Margaret Barker and all of that stuff. And I really was like, there's something here. And then, as fate would have it, I ended up in France in 2018, totally supposed to be there. And I did a sacred Mary Magdalene pilgrimage. So as many of your listeners probably know, it's believed that after the crucifixion, Mary Magdalene and some followers of Jesus left Israel, went across the sea to what is modern day France, which was then Gaul, and basically started to teach the way, capital T, capital W, of what Christ was really teaching. And some stuff with Egypt and other things. But ultimately, this sacred pilgrimage was around her. It was around following, the Rennes Chateau stuff, the Mary Magdalene Cave, the Mount Bugarash, and all of the places where it's believed, and strong legends and art and all of these things. And I was in rapture. Like, I was like, where has this been all my life? Why are we not talking about this? Because I'm 48 years old, something like that. And I'm like finally diving in. And I had read the Gnostic stuff and done that before I went. But I had a really pronounced, I was there during my wedding anniversary, and I was just feeling I fell asleep that night. And I had a middle of the night mystical experience with Mary Magdalene. Wow. And it was very sacred, but it was very, very real. And I started out with like, what do you want from me, kind of a thing. What am I doing here? I'm like leaving my family. I'm going all over the world. This is crazy stuff. And I felt this like, what do you want, Cherie? What do you want? And no one at church had ever asked me that.
Yeah.
Or asked me how I felt about anything. Mm-hmm. And I felt this inner autonomy sort of brewing, and this inner authority rising. And I reflect on that experience. That was the moment in time where everything came down for me. I was still very active in church at this time, but I was having some very dissonant feelings, and I hadn't done any deep dive research about some of the more problematic aspects. So this moment, everything unraveled after that. I almost got a divorce. Everything I ever knew, every safeguard, every relationship, everything that was familiar that I had accepted as true and good came into question. And I trace it back to literally after I got back from that trip. And everything has been a rebuild and a reboot since then.
Since that time.
And I
can relate to that.
I know. Well, I'm meeting so many women in a post-transitory, either they're in transition or ready to hit that apex point where the dark night of the soul sort of comes, or they're on the upswing, or they're post-transition and they're trying to come into redefinition around, what is this all about? And I really believe that Mary Magdalene, both her archetype and her actual historical presence, no matter how literally true everything is, she's coming through as a red force, a beautiful, sacred force for women to awaken, especially women who've been subjugated in Christianity, because that's the tradition associated with her and Jesus. And to see her in co-divine coupling with him as a feminine Christed being, who was completely misunderstood all throughout history. And that is so alive in me, just the passion of giving people that knowledge, making it more apparent. That it's so apparent to me now. Like, it's so self-evident that she was right there with everything. And so she's coming back. It's like the second coming, as you hear about in Christianity. Well, yes. And it's happening in hearts, and it's happening with the rising of the feminine. Like, she is risen. Like they say, he is risen with Easter and resurrection. Well, she is too. And she's coming through in a different way. And it's more of an embodied sense of womb wisdom, if you will, that allows us to access in our own being, not only our divine identity, but our voice, our power, and our inner authority. So the sovereignty.
Yes. I love how you described, especially the portion of your journey where coming back from that trip, it was like everything kind of fell apart as you began to realize these things. That is so true. In my case, she came into my life and I kind of managed to hold her at bay for a few years, actually. And then when she popped up again, it all fell apart. So when you were saying that, I'm like, wow, yeah, it really all did fall apart. So if anyone out there is going through that phase, you have not done anything wrong. It is falling apart, but it is also falling together in some new way. But there is that long period of rebuilding and shifting and coming into that. And to that point, the unknown, there's a lot of unknown in that season, kind of in between the initial catalyst time where you may experience her or something like the experience that Cherie had with Magdalene, between that and reconstructing a new identity. So why is the not knowing so powerful of a place to be?
Oh, well, first of all, it's terrifying.
It is.
When everything's been handed to you on a silver platter and you're told to obey it and believe it, it's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's safe.
Yeah.
We are not here to be comfortable and safe. That is not soul evolution, and it is not part of our highest growth. And I kind of knew that already, but like you said, that point from when the unraveling started, it's because of what was in my heart. It's because of the desires of my heart. I was met with those. I was met with this longing to be one with the beloved. I love the word beloved. I know you do too. I actually have a little tattoo that says beloved with a rose. It's what my name means in French. Like, I just love the idea of being in union with divine beloved. And in Mary Magdalene's case, that was Jesus. Of course, the beloved has many connotations, but for me, it was like God. I want to be in union with Christ, with God, and mother too. But that sacred longing has lived in my heart my entire life. And the religion handed me a set of doctrines and beliefs and said, well, this is the way. You have to do all these things and check all these boxes and get all these rituals and do all these things and strive to keep the commandments and all of these. And then maybe after everything that you can possibly do, maybe grace will come in and allow you to have this gift of eternal life or union with the beloved. And what I learned is that everything that I wanted in my heart, it means that I had to unravel to get it. If I really, really wanted, if there was a sacred longing in my heart to be one with the beloved, that means all of the dogma, all of the very damaging, like things like polygamy, all these things had to just go. And it was like an earthquake. It was literally PTSD level release. And it took a long, long time and years, actually. Yeah. And I'm still, I still feel very vulnerable even talking about it, because there's this element of, I can feel in my body. I can't always communicate it or express it as eloquently as I feel it. But when you are met in your sacred temple, in your holy of holies, in your heart space and in your womb space with these sacred longings, I think that's why Mary Magdalene was asking me with full feminine force, not in a nice, what do you want, honey? It was, what do you want?
Yeah.
And everything that I rattled off that I wanted, guess what? In order to claim those deep longings, like health was one of them. How could I be healthy if I'm clinging to the traditions of the fathers and I'm under a patriarchal, really, not servitude, that's not quite the right word, but I was being subjugated and I was complicit in my own subordination. And I had no idea that I was. I thought I was just being good and trying to be obedient. So yes, the point between and the sacred unraveling, it's a spiral, and everything in creation is a spiral. You have to descend. You have to go into the underworld. You have to go into the not knowing. That's part of the power of all of this. We are taught that stay safe, stay with the group, stay with the mainstream, Well, look where that's gotten us.
Yeah.
We're depressed. We're disconnected. And so I wanted connection. And in order to do that, I had to deeply deprogram, deconstruct, and unravel. And that meant a descent journey unlike anything that I celebrate it when I see it in people where they have a grounded knowing of that's what's happening. but they're so disoriented and they don't know what's up and down. And the rest of their family and friends are saying, well, just come back. This is why you're so miserable. Satan's got a hold of you now. So of course you're going to unravel. I'm sorry, I have to laugh, but that is so, that's what we need to normalize and let go of, is that somehow if you're in a descent journey, you're under some kind of spell, that you're being deceived. And it could not be further from the truth. You're getting to the core of who you are, and you're unraveling dogma. You're deconstructing emotional patterns, intergenerational trauma. It's courageous work. It's brave stuff. And it's not for the faint of heart. And here's the thing that I do know about the dark night of the soul and the unraveling. You don't choose when it happens. It comes to you based on what you're attracting from your heart space. And because I had asked for all these things, you know, I want to live my life a certain way. I want to be in devotion. I want to be at one with the beloved. I couldn't do it in the system that I was in. It was just not going to work. And so opening your heart, opening your mind, divine surrender, instead of obeying exterior authorities, that is the point of power, is accessing your own voice. And it is the still small voice. That is your soul voice. And so I don't know that I have any beautiful pat answer for how this will shake out for each person. My unraveling was messy, and it was needful. All creation is messy anyway. For anyone who's had a baby, they know that it's painful. There's labor, there's transition, but what's coming forward now is more expansive, more beautiful, more joyful, more purposeful, more fulfilling than anything that I could have even conceived of. I thought I had to suffer through this lifetime. I thought I had to endure to the end. I thought I had to wait to get my questions answered in the next life. I thought I had to just sort of fall in line and obey my leaders, who are all men, by the way. And then I would be blessed. And then God would say, good job, Cherie, you obeyed your leaders. Do you know what I mean? In the next life. Yeah. And it's like, no, heaven is now. This is now. It's coming now. Open up and receive that.
I love that. And that kind of brings me to think about the sovereignty, you know, that the heaven is now. Part of that heaven is that sense of sovereignty, being able to hold that, and with grace and humility, as you shared with me earlier. So how do you claim that? Like, what is that moment, you know, where you're really able to realize, okay, I'm living heaven now because I am walking in sovereignty with grace and humility?
I wish I could tell you that most days I feel that way. You know, part of why I love the Magdalene so much is because it meets the real, the gritty humanness with the divine desires we hold and the sacred longings. And that fire, the Magdalene flame, is alive. It's passion. It's even if the pendulum is swinging really rapidly like this, I'm gonna be okay. I feel like the greatest gift that I could give myself is compassion in this process, in the not knowing and having everything figured out. But what I do note and honor and celebrate is how I actually feel in my own body, how differently I think about people, how less judgmental I am. I used to think I was God's favorite spiritual elite, you know, chosen for the last days and all of that. We all are. We're all on earth for a very divine purpose. And this life and the consciousness shifting that's happening is such a pivotal point in history. I feel really humbled that I'm here, that I get to explore, that I get to be in the laboratory of learning here, and that my creators, I make that masculine and feminine, my creators as one with me, living through me, who experience life through me as their beloved.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling, but so liberating. I actually have this scripture right here that I keep a little plaque on my desk. It's my favorite scripture, and it's in Luke, but it's also in Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And the acceptable year of the Lord is you're living heaven now. And you can claim that now. There's so many bruised and brokenhearted people who are in cages, and I'm speaking metaphorically and literally, my sister being one of them, myself being one of them. And it's time, it's time to, sovereignty is a loaded word because people think it's being blasphemous with God. Like that somehow diminishes the sovereignty of our creator if we claim sovereignty. But that's the whole thing Jesus was teaching, as evidenced by that scripture right there, speaking messianically. We are here to be liberated. And sovereignty looks like, I know who I am, just like Jesus knew who he was. The kingdom of heaven is within me. And I can, I don't want to say claim my own worthiness, because that's not quite the right phrase, but sovereignty just means I live in shadow, I live in light, I am human, I am divine. And I trust myself to receive my own directives in this life directly in connection to source. And that means no one else, my husband, my parents, anyone else, my government leaders, whoever, no one else, no human being can tell me what to believe, what to think, and what to do. Yeah, especially in a spiritual context. And that's blasphemous and heretical from how I was raised. Yet all indicators point that religion is meant to bring you to a certain space where you can be a sovereign instead of keeping you in their system. And I say that with all respect, because I know there are healthy religions out there, my own religion included. However, you can go through your second half of life or your post-awakening with a sense of reverence and awe for what you were given and for the gifts it did give you. Yeah, for sure. And in gratitude for that. And I'm moving into that space more. I kind of went through my burn it down phase, but now I'm like, you know what? I had a really beautiful upbringing, and now I can honor that. And also, thank you very much. I'm on my own now. Thank you for what you gave me. It was beautiful. Now I'm on my own.
Yeah. And I think, the interesting thing about that moment that you just described there is I find so often it comes when we work on the healing with the eternal masculine, because when we face the mother stuff and then we face the father stuff, as more and more of that is released out of us, it opens up that space for us to recognize what was their gifts. I mean, I think there was a time also when I, to use your phrase, wanted to burn it down with my upbringing in fundamentalist Baptist Christianity. But, now with the research and work I'm doing, I'm incredibly grateful that, for example, that tradition requires you to read the entire Old Testament many times. I would never have encountered the Hebrew temple. Like if I had grown up in a more liberal denomination or no denomination, not to disrespect anyone else's tradition, but if I had, for my particular path, I would have never encountered the things that are now very meaningful for me and are a huge part of my path. And it hit me kind of like what you were saying. It hit me at a certain point that, wow, as the anger, the sadness, the disillusionment, that sense of betrayal and abandonment, as it fully releases and I'm able to heal and hold that sense of sovereignty, there is so much beauty to be celebrated. But that is a marker. I think that when you hit that point, and if anyone out there is listening and you're like, I cannot imagine getting to that point, it's okay. Just walk the journey path that you're on. But it's an amazing moment when it happens to reach that point where you can begin to reach back with some amount of love, a little bit anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And I was a missionary, people know
Ooh.
about Mormon missionaries. They usually see the guys out there, with the bright, shiny white shirts and ties. But women, like I went on a mission when I was 22, and that's not common for women back then to go on missions, but I wanted to. And so I was in the Bible Belt. I served my mission in Texas, and there was one area that I served in where there were more churches per capita than anywhere in the entire world. And they hated Mormons. And I had to stand up for my beliefs. I had to learn my New Testament backward and forward and my Old Testament. My scriptures were marked up. I got up every morning and we studied the scripture. Like, I'm so grateful. For a year and a half of my life, I did nothing but serve Christ and learn about scripture, especially the Bible, and serve people. Yeah. And so I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. And again, I look back on it and I can see there were super damaging elements to something that were 100% my mission.
100%.
Super bad. At the same time, I knew why I was doing it. I knew in my heart what it was about for me. And I still hold that, that love of people and humanity and scripture. And there's so much out there. There's so much more out there. There's, I don't know if you use the metaphor of the bubble, but there's this thing called the Mormon bubble. And it just means stay in this insular, this is your safety net. The world's going to get its hands on you. And if you go away from this bubble, like, it's bad for you. And that was part of the difficulty with the unraveling, because I was equating my unravel with what they had told me in that programming, when in actuality, I had an even stronger sense of Magdalene, Jesus, and all of the other angelic support and even ancestral support going, Cherie, keep going, stay in this, stay in the not knowing. So the scriptures are still very dear to me. And I also know that there are people on the earth bringing forth living words of nourishment and life that are so powerful and so beautiful that we can't just look at, edited, 3rd century documents anymore. There's more. And actually it's living in our bodies. We just need to access it.
That is so true. So true. And on that note, for women who may be listening to you and maybe they grew up Mormon or maybe they didn't, but either way, they resonate with the core of your experiences. Maybe they're early in this journey. Maybe it's all just fallen apart. Maybe they're living in the big unknown between. Maybe they're on the return and reclamation portion of this journey, wherever. Let's say for a woman who's maybe earlier in the process and saying, oh my goodness, this is where I'm at and I'm totally lost. What would you say to that woman?
For me, I had to open my eyes. So first of all, that would never happen. This divine process would never unfold for you unless you were ready, in a space of readiness, meaning there were already strongholds in place for you to attach to get through this. Like certain people you've met or books or tribes or whatever. So I would say trust, open your eyes and look at what's there to support you through this. Take all of the resources that you can have and put them into that. This is an investment in your soul. And also, it's okay to isolate during this time. It's okay to be an island, to be introspective, to be imperfect. My best friend was my journal, and I filled multiple, and still do.
Yeah.
Because it was a way for me to talk to myself, to talk to my soul, to keep me grounded. So grounding becomes everything. I love to use different holistic things and gifts of the earth to be able to ground me, like getting out in nature, deep breathing, essential oils, even crystals. They all have their place. They're not going to do the work for you. The work happens in you, but they are supports to what's happening in you. And no matter what anyone thinks is weird, you literally just have to put, I call it the divine egg, like the cosmic feminine divine egg around you, where it's still permeable and you can let things in as needed, but you really are cocooning. This is butterfly soup. This is caterpillar soup to make the butterfly. So that looks like undoing. That looks like ugly crying. That looks like maybe swearing a lot. That looks like, and I love your somatic practice of just going out and just yelling and getting things out and pounding.
Super basic, hey?
Yes. Like when I read your book about, here are the things that you might know if you're, a Magdalene or, Kadesha or whatever. How do you pronounce that? Kadesha?
Kadisha. Although some would say Kadosha, depending on how you take the Hebrew, but yeah.
Yeah. Literally everything on there, drawn to essential oils, drawn to create, wealth, drawn to, the word beloved. Like I was checklisting everything you had on there, and it was so affirming. I'm like, there really are weird people like me out there.
Yes.
I don't have to fall in line with the groupthink. That's the whole point of unplugging from the matrix and these old structures, is to get away from the mass consciousness, is to get away from that. So even if other people think it's super weird, give yourself that permission to connect to. I know a lot of women who've been served by doing plant medicine, myself included. I went to Costa Rica.
Wow.
And did ayahuasca, which I don't recommend, by the way, but it was what was calling me, and it was a feminine plant, and it was calling me for 2 years before I finally had the courage to go. And that was also a very pivotal point in the apex of my unraveling, to be able to midwife me through to that next layer.
Yeah.
So there's sometimes you'll be called to do things that are completely unorthodox, out of the box. You got to realize that you're trying to get out of orthodoxy. It's been subjugating humanity for millennia. So why would you continue to do the same things you've always done? So when I say weird, I don't mean put yourself in danger or stay. So you just have to stay grounded. Stay grounded and let yourself explore, because maybe to this point you haven't done that. You haven't allowed yourself to, because you've been afraid of being deceived. You've been afraid of the judgment of others. And that's part of the part of the parameters around awakening, are that you do things that are out of the box, that are other people might laugh at. And that's exactly what happened to all of the great masters and teachers on the earth. Were scorned and mocked and crucified for doing what was unorthodox.
Yes, isn't that the truth? And that permission that you mentioned, giving yourself permission to actually experiment and explore, that is huge, because as you said, we've been so conditioned, many of us coming from certain types of backgrounds, not to. And the interesting thing is, like, I watch women go different routes. Once they've come full circle on this journey, maybe it's not really ever full circle, but they've come a significant portion around the circle. And some remain in very unorthodox practice. Some have no connection to practice, and some actually return to a quote unquote more orthodox practice, but from a completely different place. And from that place of sovereignty, of knowing why they are selectively choosing to engage with certain practices or a certain lineage. And it's just completely different. Whichever route you go, there's no right answer. Not that I don't think there is anyway, but it's always from that place of sovereignty with grace and humility. And that makes all the difference, because isn't that really what we were missing the first time around, is the sense of sovereignty, and realizing that we're engaging, but we weren't engaging from a place where we really understood that we had that power to choose to be there or not be there, that we could speak up, and to allow ourselves to be held, really, even by that protection of the eternal masculine, especially. So
yes, because it was always so conditional. It was conditioned on our performance and worthiness. Yeah. So my whole life was a hamster wheel, trying to run the hamster wheel of worthiness and striving. The word strive is very common in Mormonism, and people don't really pick up on it. It's everywhere. Strive, 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 strive. And I have to say also, Lisa, that there are women and men who have completely awakened to some of the distortions and shadow aspects of their religion, but they choose to stay in. And I did that for a while too. Yeah. And when I say, I haven't officially left Mormonism, I tell people I've never been more aware. I've never been more aware of history. I've never been more aware of current events, what's happening in the culture, than even when I was completely attending every Sunday. And I honor people who choose whatever they choose. If they choose, like for my own mental health, I cannot sit and listen to rhetoric that is telling people they're not worthy Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. And I will not put my children in that position either.
Totally.
That's me. But I did sit in church feeling that way for years, and until it was affecting my health, and until I gave myself that permission. And I literally heard the still small voice say, Cherie, you don't have to keep doing this. You don't have to. It's not a badge of honor for you to stay in and continue to try to make this work. That said, I have dear family members, my parents who live literally 3 minutes away, who are very active in Mormonism, a sister not far from me who is also, and very dear friends and business associates. Again, I live here in Utah. I'm literally in the heart of the Valley of the Ancestors and all of the tradition. So I honor it. And I'm to the point where I can love and accept and not judge someone who maybe is riding that line a little bit, and they just haven't quite decided how they're going to move this through, because it's layered. It is layered. Some people's livelihoods, their whole social structure, their whole financial, everything could be affected. And when I got really to the bottom of my barrel that I told you about, where I was like in the spiral all the way down, I'm like, I don't care if I lose all the friends in the world, all of my family, my life, my husband, my career. It was all enmeshed in Mormonism. And I was like, I don't care anymore. I just want the truth for me. I need to know what is my highest path. And that surrender was like, I would give my very life for these people. And for my own sovereignty. I would give my life for my own self. And that sounds very paradoxical. I don't mean suicide. I just mean, like, I will lay everything on the altar.
Sacrifice. Yes.
And the highest law of sacrifice is not to obey exterior authorities like we were taught. The highest law of sacrifice is to give everything over. Everything over to the divine. It doesn't necessarily just mean 10% of your income or a few commandments. It's no, like, show me all the shadows, show me everything. And then I will trust that I'm being led and guided, and I'm not going to turn away anymore. I'm not going to put on a happy face when it's not happy. It's, I believe that's what my sister did. And I believe she has a message now that if she could speak, that would be very, very different than the one that she was living while she was still alive.
Wow. Such powerful stuff. Thank you so much for these words of wisdom. Incredible. And I know that you are working with women in various capacities through Stand, Speak, and Shine and other initiatives that you have. So why don't you share with us a bit about what is going on if someone's listening to you and saying, oh my goodness, I must speak to this woman, I must work with this woman, and it must happen immediately. How can they get a hold of you, and how can they work with you?
Yeah, thank you. Stand, Speak, Shine are my programs for women. I actually have a course that's 12 weeks or 12 principles, 12 feminine embodiment empowerment principles that you can go as fast or as slow as you want through those. But it's all about reclaiming your own inner authority and your own inner sovereignty. It's sacred feminine leadership. People just want to go to either standspeakshine.com or CherieBurton.com. Both of those will land you into a freebie where you can get a free multisensory healing kit digitally delivered.
Ooh.
And that's really fun. So I love just talking like this and getting this out. I think the more of us that align in and become completely transparent in what we're noticing and seeing and sensing and feeling,